Path reinforcement is very useful when you need to add U-bars or L-bars along a path. For example, a series of slab edges could be used by the path reinforcement command to populate U-bars around the perimeter. Path reinforcement can also incorporate curves. The path reinforcement by default is grouped within a path system, but you have the option of removing this, which creates separate rebar sets that you can then manipulate as usual. Varying reinforcement is useful in situations where the formwork is skewed or the element's section size is continually changing. In the examples below, you can see two layers of reinforcement added with varying range. The stirrups within the tapered beam are varying along the length. Before we start creating reinforcement bar, we're first going to open a 3D view and tile these views side by side. In the project browser, go ahead and open up the 3D view. Note we have the two tabs open at the top. We now need to tile these windows side by side. Let's use the Revit keyboard shortcut WT. And also we might want to initially zoom all, so again we can use the keyboard shortcut ZA. Okay, so let's now begin by looking at path reinforcement. We'll zoom up on our 4th floor. Our intention here is to add some path reinforcement around the edge of this slab. To do this, on the structure ribbon, select Path. A valid host for path reinforcement is a structural floor or a wall. So in this case, we'll select our structural floor. On the context ribbon, the default is to create lines around our slab, but of course we could also use pick lines. We have the option of flipping if the reinforcement is on the wrong side of the slab. In the Properties palette, we can then configure our settings. So you'll notice here the layout rule is maximum spacing. Here we're going to use a bar spacing of 10 inches. Our primary bar type will be bar number 3. Our bar length is going to be 18 inches and our primary shape is 17. Let's go ahead and select Finish Edit Mode. Now if we zoom up on the 3D view, we may notice that the U-bars are in the wrong orientation. So here we can select our U-bar and we can press the spacebar to orientate these. Another potential issue will be where the U-bars clash in the corner. Now at the minute this is a path reinforcement element. If I select that element, on the context ribbon I can remove the path system. This will then break down the path system into separate ranges that I can then manually take control of. Okay, so our path reinforcement is now complete. Let's now move on to some varying range rebar. In the 4th floor, we'll note here that we have a single reinforcement bar modelled. Our intention here is to create a rebar set for this to distribute it along the slab, but we want the bar to remain the same length but orientated to this edge of the slab. Now on the context ribbon you'll note that the varying range rebar set is activated. I'm just going to temporarily deactivate this and then go ahead and create a rebar set. Notice here that Revit then keeps the bar parallel to the slab edge. However, if I go ahead and select a varying rebar set, you'll now notice that the bar is skewed and following the skewed slab edge. Let's now take another look at varying range rebar on a retaining wall structure. I'm going to close down the 4th floor and in the project browser, let's go ahead and open section 1. Once again, we'll tile our views so we can use the keyboard shortcut WT. And we'll zoom up on our retaining wall structure. So of course you'll notice here that the retaining wall structure in this particular example here is tapering. The section that we're looking at here is cut at the smaller end of the retaining wall. We're going to create a straight bar in this sectional view and then use the varying range rebar to create a varying range rebar set where the bar length will change. Now you may remember that the reinforcement settings will control how that bar is marked. Let's take another look at this. In the reinforcement drop-down, let's select Reinforcement Settings. We'll select a varying rebar set, and you'll notice here that we're going to use number bars as a whole, and we've got the suffix A. So what's going to happen here is we'll have the primary bar mark, it may be bar mark 5 for example, and there we might see 5A, 5B, 5C, etc. Okay, let's first model our reinforcement bar. Let's start by selecting Rebar. The placement method currently is set to Rebar. In this example, I'm going to use Sketch Rebar. We'll go ahead and select our wall. And here we can sketch our reinforcement bar. Once we've finished sketching, we can select Finish Edit Mode. If I select that newly sketched reinforcement bar, you'll note in the Properties palette that Revit has auto detected the shape, in this case 0, 0. Let's now take a look at that reinforcement bar in 3D. First, we'll set the View Visibility States. So in the Properties palette, we can select View Visibility State and then Edit. And here in our 3D view, we want to make this view unobscured and view as a solid. And here's our reinforcement bar. On the context ribbon, let's now create a rebar set from this. So again here, we'll use maximum spacing. We'll have a spacing initially of 10 inches. And you'll notice now that the rebar's length is constant across the tapered wall. However, if we go ahead and select a varying rebar set, what we can now do is use the shape handle to adjust the reinforcement bars. Finally, let's take a look at the schedule. In order for this to appear in the schedule, we need to give it the correct partition. In the Properties palette, type in DWG01. In the project browser, let's go ahead and open up DWG01 Rebar Schedule. And you'll now notice that we've got our host mark, RW01. So you'll now see that we have the bar mark 1A, 1B, 1C, and so on. This was due to the fact that we've changed our reinforcement settings, and also in the schedule we've combined two parameters together. Let's take a brief look at that. In the Properties palette, let's edit the fields. Note in here that I have something called my bar mark. And if I come down and edit this, you'll now notice that this is actually comprised of two parameters. You can see here I have the rebar number and then also the rebar number suffix, which is the A, B, C, D. Okay, so our schedule is now complete.